We all know our modern software systems are pretty incredible, but they've got a few critical drawbacks. One of these is they produce a relentless, non-stop river of data. Every single log, every metric, every trace. It all adds up in this digital flood that isn't just overwhelming, it can be very expensive to manage. Let's use our imagination for a moment. Let's pretend we're digital prospectors. You're standing right in the middle of this river of data, and somewhere hidden in that absolute torrent of information are these priceless nuggets of gold, the critical insights you actually need. But of course, they're mixed in with a ton of silt and noise. So the real challenge is, how do you find that gold without it getting swept away in the current? This concept brings us right to our first and maybe most important challenge on this little prospecting journey, really understanding the incredibly high cost of all that noise. To really get this, we've got to break our data down into two basic piles. First, you've got the signal. This is the gold, right? It's the valuable, actionable insights. Things like errors, moments of high latency, key business events, like a user actually completing a checkout. And then you have the noise. This is all the high volume, low value junk. Your routine debug logs and that constant health checks. It's basically the riverbed silt. So what's the fix? Well, this visual shows it off perfectly. All of your data flows into a smart filter. This is our OpenTelemetry collector. Think of it like a bouncer for your data. It intelligently separates the stream. It waves off the important stuff, our gold, right on through to your analytics tools, while all that low-volume noise gets either dropped or sent off to some cheap storage. The goal here is simple. Get the best possible signal-to-noise ratio you can. And here's the bottom line. It's all about completely changing what you're paying for. You want to pay for valuable insights to make your business better, not for the digital exhaust that your systems are constantly spewing out. So if the big problem is getting too much data, the solution seems pretty obvious, right? Just collect less of it. It sounds logical, but here's the challenge. This is where a lot of folks walk into a pretty dangerous trap. This problem of simple sampling. The common wisdom is to just say, okay, let's grab 10% of everything and call it a day. But this simple sounding fix is actually a trap that can make you completely blind to your biggest problems. Let's look at exactly why this is such a disaster. Imagine the full stream of data over here on the left. The green circles are all successful requests, and the red squares are critical errors. A simple sample just grabs a random 10%. Look what happens. By pure luck, it misses almost every single red square. And the result, your dashboard looks amazing, 0 errors. Meanwhile, your environment is actually on fire. You've accidentally created a completely biased, totally misleading view of reality. Alright, so if the common approach is a trap, what's the alternative? How do we sample intelligently and make sure we're keeping the gold nuggets while letting all that worthless mud just wash away? Let's open up our Prospector's Toolkit and take a look at a few smart, effective sampling strategies that can actually work. First up in our toolkit is something called Stratified Sampling. Instead of treating all your data as equal, you divide it into different groups or strata based on how important it is. So in this example, the super high volume payment service might get sampled at a really low rate, say 5%, but the lower volume, yet way more business critical checkout service, that gets sampled at a much higher 50% rate. This makes sure your most important signals don't get drowned out by all the noise. The next tool isn't really a piece of code, it's more of a mindset, and it's summed up perfectly by this incredible quote from Charlie Munger. Tell me where I'm going to die, and I won't go there. That's the whole idea behind inversion. Most people ask about what data would be useful to collect, and that question leads to collect everything just in case. Inversion flips that question completely on its head. You should be asking what data, if it were missing, would make troubleshooting impossible. That one simple change in perspective forces you to ignore the noise and focus only on the absolute mission-critical showstoppers. Tool number 3 is all about leaving yourself some breadcrumbs. Whenever you sample data, you should also record how you sampled it right inside the trace data itself. Stuff like the sampling probability and the strategy you used. This is so critical because it lets you correct for any bias later on what you're doing with your analysis. And it creates a historical record so you can make valid comparisons even if you change your sampling rules down the road. So let's talk about another critical scenario. What happens when your system is totally slammed? Talking about a huge sale or a big product launch. What do you do then to avoid a data flood? This is one of the biggest dangers. If your telemetry pipeline gets totally overwhelmed during a massive traffic spike and just starts dropping data, you lose all that visibility at the exact moment when you need it the most. It's kind of like your smoke alarm deciding to shut off because there's too much smoke in the room. It's not very helpful. So what's the solution? It's a clever little concept called back pressure. Think of it like a traffic controller. When the system sending the data, the producer of that data, is moving way faster than the system trying to receive it, you get a bottleneck. So instead of just letting data pile up and crash, the system sends a slowdown signal somewhere back down the line. This prevents a total data pileup and makes sure if any of that data does have to be dropped, it's done randomly, not just during that peak rush hour we need it the most. Alright, so we've got our tools, we're ready to go. But a real pro doesn't just use their tools, they're always keeping them sharp. And that's where refining your technique through continuous calibration comes into play. So how do you actually know if all this smart sampling is working? You've got to give yourself a reality check. Periodically, maybe during a low traffic time, you turn that fire hose all the way back on and you sample 100% of the data that comes in just for a little while. This gives you a perfect baseline. By comparing your normal samples against this complete picture, you can spot any blind spots you might have missed and really fine-tune your strategy. It's the ultimate way to make sure you're not fooling yourself. So let's recap our Prospector's toolkit real quick. First, we're using stratified sampling to prioritize what's important. We're recording our methods to stay honest and correct for bias. We're using back pressure to handle rush hour without crashing, and we're doing regular reality checks to make sure our tools stay sharp. When you put all these techniques together, something fundamentally changes. You stop paying to manage a costly, messy river of mud and start cultivating a priceless stream of pure gold. That's all for today. Make sure to visit integrationplumbers.io to find out how we can help with your OpenTelemetry pipelines.